Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Samanthropolitics. I'm your host, Samantha Carlin. I'm delighted to be here with you. This is your source for global news with a feminist lens. Today, we're actually going to be looking domestically because the midterm elections are coming up in less than 1 week. So, first of all, I think the fact that we're even talking about the midterms is a good thing. There was one point where people were like, oh, what was the midterms? Is that something that I need to vote in? Because midterm turnout is typically lower than presidential elections. But there are so many states, so many Senate seats, so many House seats, so many state Senate and House and state House seats that are up in the air right now, and so many swing voters that I think people are really paying attention to the midterm elections. Now, we have three guests waiting in the wings, two who are running in their respective races in Virginia and in Texas in very competitive districts, both women. And we have alumni of the Women's Leadership Challenge, which is the leadership program that I teach, Olivia Logan, who's a political consultant who is also waiting in the wings to give us her take on important swing seats in the Senate, reproductive rights, gun violence, the economy, and all other issues, and to give us her predictions on what's going to happen in some of these hotly contested races. So I want to thank you for tuning in with us tonight. And please encourage you to stay till the end to hear from all of our guests who are all really amazing trailblazers within the political system in America. So Zach, let's put up that first graph. What do people care about in the elections this year? Well, inflation and the economy take the number one slot. Ironically, the majority of people seem to think that Republicans have a better handle on the economy, even though historically that's not true. Let's remember who said it's the economy, stupid, Bill Clinton. The second thing that really concerns people are crime and violence. With a lot of Republicans running law and order type campaigns, trying to say that Democrats are not good at law and order or they're not good at decreasing gun violence. That's despite the fact that the reason that we have more guns than people in this country is because Republicans who do not want to pass gun restrictions, even though the majority of Americans, including Republicans, do support universal background checks, do support red flag laws, do support assault weapons bans and bans on high capacity magazines. And yet, the Republicans are running on the law and order side, which I still don't completely understand how that works. Now, what do Democrats care about more than Republicans? Well, Democrats are more concerned with things like racism, which makes sense considering Black Lives Matter, with with climate change, and with abortion and reproductive rights with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. What do Republicans care more about? They care the most about the economy, about curbing illegal immigration, and about crime. Again, even though the majority of gun laws are kept in place by Republicans who refuse to turn them over because they're beholden to the NRA. Other issues that have come up are January 6th, with one issue in this country is that many people who are running on the Republican side are election deniers. They believe in something called the Great Lie, which means that they still don't think that Joe Biden won the election. I guess they didn't get the memo. So there's also something particularly dangerous about this election because we have election deniers that are running for office. I would say that somebody that's denying the election is also denying the democratic process and the whole concept of democracy as a whole. Now, let's look at the House. So you can see in this chart, Zach, you could put that chart up, that the Democrats currently control the House of Representatives with 220 seats versus 212 for Republicans. Then you can put up that next map. You can see that this has shifted and swapped time over time, with it going like that over the last 30 or so years. Zach, if you could put up that next map, you can see where the most hotly contested races are within the House. For example, states like Arizona are incredibly important when it comes to House races. How about the Senate? Zach, you can put up that map. Thank you to the New York Times for creating this graph. Let's look at the swing seats in the Senate. So what we're looking at are Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Nevada being really the toss-ups that we're not sure what's going to happen in particular races. These are incredibly important states. Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio leaning Republican, and Arizona, Colorado, and New Hampshire leaning Democrat. So those are the key Senate races we want to pay attention to. And when we have Olivia on later in the show, she's going to talk to us about some of those particular races. Now, obviously, some of the issues that are really, really important that we're going to be talking about tonight are Roe v. Wade, are gun violence, are the economy, are why women have a particularly unique approach to some of these issues, and how do they affect women differently. So another thing to mention, since we do talk a lot about feminism in this show, is that women are the best voters. Women vote higher than men in every election, including the midterms and the presidential elections. So I would just say to all of those women out there that are voting, thank you. I would also say, and this is based on anecdotal experience working on political campaigns, that women also make up the majority of volunteers. I can count on one hand, working for the Democratic Party, how many men walked in the door. I'll never forget being in Hillary for America campaign and seeing a older white male veteran walk in the door, and I was just astonished. And I was so happy. I was like, thank you. I'm so glad to have you. So I would say too, besides everyone's going to tell you, vote, 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 volunteer. These last few days are so important. It's called GOTV, or Get Out the Vote. Incredibly, incredibly important time, not just to donate, but also to physically go knock on doors. It does work. Talking to voters about issues does work in terms of helping them to vote and to decide who to vote for. So I want to go to one of our guests because she is running around to events tonight. She is in Texas and is a Democratic candidate for Texas State Senate in the 9th District, Gwenn Burud. She is a proud native of Fort Worth, Texas. She's a wife, mom, a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, an activist, and now a candidate for Texas Senate District 9. She grew up understanding the importance of education and earned a master's degree from Texas Women's University. She recently retired from a local school district where she specialized in working with the families of deaf and hard of hearing infants, toddlers, and the birth to 3 age range, which means Gwenn has incredible patience, which is something you really need in order to get things done in politics, because you have to listen to people and respond to them, not just talk over them. So I would say already I'm a fan of Gwenn. She has also seen the Texas education system from the view of a student, a public school teacher, and a parent, and she knows that as a state, Texas can do better when it comes to education. Gwenn, welcome to Samanthropolitics.
Thank you so much, Samantha. I really appreciate you having me on.
So how did you end up running for office? Let's hear your story. Since women just don't run as much as men. I mean, the numbers tick up and then they still linger around 29%. So talk to me about your why.
Yes. Yeah. What is it? A woman has to be asked about 7 times before she might decide to run. Yeah. So a little bit like the bio said, I was, first of all, my parents also, in addition to emphasizing education, they emphasized the fact that we should be involved in government. We should understand what our leaders are doing. I will tell you, the first introduction I had to really being like inspired by the political arena is watching old video footage of Barbara Jordan. And if you don't know Barbara Jordan, she is a hero here for us Texans, especially as Texas women. She was not only a state senator here, but she was a United States representative, as well as she was on the Nixon impeachment hearings. And just the way that she laid out that case, it was like, that can be a force for good. So that was one way. That was how I got interested. But then I've been an activist since about 2008. I'm going to say it's Barack Obama pretty much inspired me. But then I learned about state and local politics and how significant it is, and how that we really need to focus on those folks who are representing us at the state level, because that's what's affecting us daily. So knocked on a lot of doors for campaigns. You know, I was on the board of a lot of Democratic clubs. And then 2016 happened, and we all know how that goes. So, but what I found, I went to the Women's March in Austin, and I was so inspired by what I saw, because we were all in that deep funk for so long. And seeing that and seeing all
Which Women's March was this? What year?
It was in 2017. It was the first one. So
Okay.
it was that, yeah. So, and like I said, I went to Austin, and then I found out, we knew that they were happening all over, but we didn't know the impact it would have and how many would be coming. And it was like, okay, we can be this force for change. And then I get back to my old, activist lifestyle. And then I see all these great candidates stepping up to run, and especially female candidates. And I was just so inspired by it. And then I saw, okay, which one's running and for state senate. I had a personal beef with my state senator because he was a former school board member who forgot about public education along the way. He's pushed
What do you mean he forgot about public education? What do you mean by that?
So he is a school choice proponent, and what that means is that push for privatization. In fact, he wants vouchers, and he is going strong for those. So this, I couldn't understand.
Can you just describe why is that bad?
So vouchers, what they do is they take money away from your already struggling public schools and put that into a private venture, and it could be anything, and it's really. It could be like, say here, they talked about $5,000 for a voucher. Well, that's just a discount for people who can already afford it. And it can be for a religious institution. So my tax dollars are paying for someone to send their child to a religious institution where their teachers are not required to have the same oversight as, say, teachers in a public school. We have to be certified. They don't have to be certified in the private school sector.
I didn't know that. So like in Catholic, is that why there's so many nuns that are like teachers?
Well, I don't know. I haven't thought. Yeah, but yeah, they just don't have the same oversight. And so, and also, we also look at charter schools as well. Again, they are also taking money from public schools as well. They are completely funded by the state, whereas public schools are funded more by the tax dollars, or like your property taxes, and the state kicks in the rest pretty much. So charter schools are already doing that, taking that money away, and they don't have that oversight as well. Now, as you know, they are required to do well on to meet the expectations on standardized testing, and they have reviewed that way, but that's about it. And they even elect their own school boards, whereas they appoint their own school boards, whereas in an ISD or a public school, those school board members have to be elected. Well, the charter system picks their own. That. Yeah, and same in the private sector as well. Private schools as well. So I just didn't understand why a former public school board trustee is doing this, knowing the struggles that we have in public school. And well, when you follow the money, you find out.
And when you say when you follow the money, you find out, what do you mean by that?
You find out that he gets donations from a lot of charter school organizations, and or not even charter, but also private school. Like I don't know if you've seen the CNN documentary "Follow the Money," or Deep in the Pockets of Texas. I'm sorry, but it basically means follow the money. There's we call the Wilkes and the Dunns are big into wanting to push for these private schools. They have their own in their area of Texas, and basically they're controlling their legislators. How? Through their donations and through making sure that they vote the way that they want them to vote. Previously, it was Empower Texans. I don't know if you've heard anything about that one. It's basically 5 big donors, billionaires, putting it into this organization that then buys their legislators. Now it's,
Mm.
gosh, I'm missing the name. They changed the name because we caught on to it. So the name is escaping me. So that is something that I thought, okay, nobody's running against him. I am. So that's
I
what got me
love that.
into it
I
in
love that. So you're
2018. And
like,
that,
I am.
yeah, and that was 2018. We did pretty well on that one. It was a 30-point deficit from 2014, the person who ran then, 30-point deficit. When I ran, we increased that by 22 points. We
Wow.
narrowed the margins. And so we did a lot of work, and it was a long shot race. And then the Biden numbers put it at this particular district at a Republican +2.
Wow.
And then gerrymandering happened. So
Mm.
I'm running in a different district, but it is still winnable. Depending on who you talk to, that's in that 9 to 13 point range.
I still think
But
that, it's so important to point out, people always say like, well, like, what's the point of running if you don't win? And like, I always think about the Stacey Abrams example of how Stacey Abrams really laid the groundwork for Georgia to have two Democratic senators, which was like unheard of. She
right,
lost, but her coalition, her NGO did so much voter registration and voter outreach that it
mhm,
really laid the groundwork for Georgia to become blue, which really was
right,
unheard of. So I think that that's really
right,
awesome that you were able to take that, something that was so heavily Republican and
mhm,
build up the Democratic base.
right.
Why? I mean, why do people vote for you? What's your appeal? Like, why should people vote for you?
I think I'm not your traditional politician. I'm a public school teacher. I'm a mom. Uh, I run a grassroots campaign, which means we don't take corporate PAC money. So
Mhm.
I'm somebody you can trust, I think. And I'm somebody that's, you know, hard at work being a change agent. One of the things that people say about me is I have hustle. I'm always knocking on doors. I'm always on the phone asking for those donor dollars. Or I'm always talking, just I'm hustling around to different events just to make sure that more people can hear what the message is that we have to say here. And the big thing is here in Texas, we are the number 9 world economy.
Mm,
And that's great. It's something to be proud of. We're a prosperous Texas. However, we're leaving the most vulnerable behind.
mhm.
So I'm here for the everyday person who's like me. So I would say that's
So what are
part
your
of the
top
deal.
issues that if you like, you're in office day
Mhm.
one, what do you do? What are the top issues that you take on?
Dear Lord, put me on that public ed committee. Put me on education. One of the things that we have an issue with here in Texas is the funding of our public schools, the formula that they use. It relies heavily on your property taxes and as home values go up, that means people are paying more and more into the public schools or education, and the state is kicking in less and less. Like, say, in 2011, we had a 50-50 split. 50% came from your property taxes, the other 50% came from the state. Now that has gone down to about a 60 something 40 something split, or 60-40 split, depending. Sometimes yeah, so at one point it was like at 34% for the state, and the rest was kicked in by your property taxes. So that's got to change, because you're unfairly penalizing your taxpayer, your consumers. So that's one thing I want to change. That's going to take a lot to do. It's not an easy problem to fix, but we've got to get back to that 50-50 split.
Mm,
Then the other one would be, here in Texas, we are the number 1 uninsured state in the nation. We're also the number 1 in maternal mortality. But a lot of things contribute to
so
that. But the
number one uninsured health insurance wise.
health insurance, yes.
Okay.
So, and then it leads to a lot of other things. Like I said, we're also number 1 in maternal mortality. But we did not accept Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Health Care Act.
Mm,
We're one of now only 12 states who have not. We're leaving billions on the table. And by doing something as just as simple as expanding Medicaid here can ensure a lot more folks, but it also can help pay off some of the uncompensated care that is happening at the hospitals. 80% of that could be paid off.
What do you mean
Where,
by uncompensated care?
like when somebody doesn't have insurance and they get their medical treatment at the emergency room. So,
So basically, if you expand Medicaid, then more
mhm,
people have access to health insurance, and then they also
mhm.
won't go into emergency rooms and not have health insurance that can then pay for their hospital stays. Is that
Right.
accurate?
Yes, yes, that's exactly right. And you know, the third issue that I have, that I really want to focus on. Call me a tree hugger, but clean air and water. We want to make sure
I mean,
here.
it's not a tree hugger. I mean, it's like which who does not want clean air and water? I mean, like
Yeah,
I think that's a universal, put it in Maslow's hierarchy. Like we all want to drink
we need it.
clean water and not have to. I remember living in Peru and literally you had to buy water. Like you could not drink out of the tap. You had to buy water. And it's so
Hmm.
frustrating. I think everyone needs to go to a country where they cannot drink the water or they get violently ill from having, lettuce that was washed in the water because it's not just drinking. It's like if you want to eat a vegetable, you can only go to a five-star restaurant where they have the money to wash it in bottled water, or else you're risking your stomach or
Yes,
some kind of disease to drink that. So I
right.
don't think that that's tree hugging at all. I think that's just a basic human need.
Hmm.
So anyway, I
Yes.
didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
So clean air and
No, and that's right. And we want to look at our alternative energy sources, our renewable sources. We rely very heavily on finite energy here in Texas. We are, known for oil and gas, natural gas as a big thing here, but we are also number one in solar power and wind power.
water.
So we can actually build on that, continue to be that energy leader that we've been known for here in Texas, but make sure now we can focus on clean renewable energy. And I would love to see that be our standard rather than a big oil and gas.
Absolutely. So let's talk about reproductive rights for a second. I mean,
Yeah.
Texas really was I think it was the first state to hit the news to ban abortion. And now Texas bans abortion at all stages of pregnancy, except
Mhm.
for a life threatening medical emergency, which I don't think includes if you're having like, does that what is there's so many things that doesn't include a life saving of like what is life saving and what is not, right?
Right. And it's so vague because they say at risk of the mother, but let me tell you a scenario that is happening here. More than one
Please.
occasion it's happened. One woman, she was getting this has been the story of a couple of women that we've heard here in Texas, and it's also the Beto ads show that as well. Couple wanted super excited to be pregnant. All of a sudden, water breaks 18th week.
Hmm.
So this particular patient went into the hospital. They said, yeah, of course, we know that that baby is not viable at that point. They're not going to live outside the
Right.
womb. So they had to wait for the heartbeat to actually stop because it is the heartbeat bill. That's how medical professionals at the hospital, they didn't want to touch it because they said, look, we could get in trouble. However, even though we know that baby's not going to make it, that parent went home and got sicker and sicker and was given a description of what has to happen before she can come back to the hospital to have the procedure performed. And it was pretty graphic and detailed. I mean, just the idea that she had to go through
So
all of
basically, she
this
almost had
to
to
get
be
the care.
dead to come back to
Pretty
the
much.
before she came back.
Right. She had to go, yeah, like almost like going into sepsis. Yeah.
Jesus
So
Christ.
that basically that heartbeat had to stop. Now, eventually they were able to go ahead and do the procedure. However, how many women are going to die? We've already heard too many of these cases. Um, this is what happens when you have two chambers full of mainly men uh, deciding on what should happen with a woman's body. Uh, you know, they did not listen to medical professionals. If they had, they would have they would have never come up with this. And it's the most extreme because like you said, it is in the case of, endangering the mother's life. Everything else off limits. Rape, sorry, incest. And so we are going to also see some of those situations here where you're going to have a pregnant 10-year-old and you're going to put her through that and you're going to victimize her twice.
Do you know what I can't understand? I really want to wrap my head around this and I cannot figure it out. Are people not understanding that if young people end up having kids that they can't afford, if they make it through the pregnancy at all, because pregnancy is incredibly dangerous for kids under 18,
right?
That for a state that doesn't want Medicaid expansion on the Republican side, is there not an understanding if people have babies that they cannot afford to take care of, there will be more people who need insurance, public education, welfare, and state benefits because they can't afford to take care of the children? Like, is that missing? Like, why is no one talking about being fiscally conservative as not being like being pro or anti-choice is not? It just doesn't work with being fiscally conservative because all these people are going to end up on welfare.
Right. Yeah, and there's that, and then there's not enough programs for access to contraception. Here in Texas, that Hobby, I don't know if you remember the Hobby Lobby lawsuit. Yeah. And they can basically decide that even employers don't have to provide contraception to their insured, the employees they're insuring. But if we had, just imagine this world, if we had comprehensive sex education at our schools, because that's what we should be teaching instead of abstinence, which is not realistic for anybody.
Is Texas teaching abstinence? What is Texas teaching? Or is it just
they,
different by district?
It's not, we don't, it's basically health. So, yeah, but it's not a specialized, it's not a specialized curriculum. They do not teach sex education per se, because we have the overarching hand of Christian nationalism, which is kind of dictating what happens when it comes to contraception. Oh my gosh! So we don't get to you have the comprehensive sex education, then you can't, you don't have that access to contraception. So if you want to stop abortion, why
would you not have contraception and comprehensive sexual education? It's like the research shows that the states with abstinence-only education also have the highest rates of teen pregnancy. So clearly, it's not stopping people from having sex. Saying, "Hey, don't have sex, bad plan." That's not actually stopping anyone from having sex. But again, it's like something that people have missed the memo on, that this doesn't actually like prevent pregnancy, which again makes me feel like, have you read Pro by Katha Pollitt?
I have not.
Great book. I highly encourage you. But it basically comes back to my feeling that it's about control, and that truthfully, that if women have babies, that, ultimately care falls to the women most times, that we cannot compete with men in whatever,
right.
That we're not a threat to men's power because we are encumbered by children and pregnancy and all of those types of things.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing, and they don't care about the data behind that though, because like here in Texas, we're number 2 in teen pregnancy, number 1 in repeat teen pregnancy. You would think that
teen pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my God! So someone's getting pregnant at like 16 and 18, or 14 and 16.
Yeah. Yeah. And you would think they would look at that and try to prevent those pregnancies from even occurring in the first place, but no.
So is your opponent in this race the same guy as last time? Who's running against you?
Yes. His name is Kelly Hancock. He started out in the state house in 2007, and then was elected in 2012 to state senate. He, like I said, he is a former school board trustee. So he's kind of come up through that way, and he's also a business owner. He owns a chemical company that sells to fracking companies.
Sounds like a model social change citizen.
Yeah, he's great, and he was one of the co-authors of the abortion ban here. So he was one of the SB8 co-authors. Yeah.
So I know you have another event to get to. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you 2 more questions. One, Beto O'Rourke. Does he have a shot? I feel bad for the poor guy. Like he's just goes for it and goes for it and goes for it. Do you think he has a shot at winning?
Well, we can't tell through the polls. The polls are so crazy these days. One will
Yeah.
have him, okay, he's at 2 points. Then another one will say 13 or 11. It's like the polls don't know what they're doing any longer. I don't know. But first of all, the thing about Beto is he inspires so many. And when you talked about the midterms and and then 2018, we have to remember that Beto also helped 12 House seats flip and 2 state Senate seats. I mean,
Mm,
because of the mobilization behind him. So even
mhm.
though he was not necessarily elected that time, look at the
Right. He
magic he
helped
did. He
elect.
helped.
Right. Just like the
Yeah.
Susanna Gibson example. Absolutely.
Yeah, and a lot of strong, and a lot of strong candidates as well. But I mean, he really helped with that. He really kind of he lifted everybody up as well. And then, the presidential race, that was a little bit of a problem there, but we are excited about him. He's such a genuine person, just like Stacey Abrams. Uh, the race I'm looking at too is Rochelle Garza, and I don't know if you've heard anything
Mm,
about that one. She is running against Ken Paxton, and he's our indicted attorney general. We always like to say that, yeah.
mm.
Um,
And what was he
and
indicted for, Gwen?
some sort of securities fraud. But now he's also under investigation by the FBI for kind of like a pay for play kind of thing.
Another
Yeah,
model citizen.
yeah, and of course, and I think he gave his mistress a job. Yeah, yeah, it's great. And his wife is a sitting state senator. Yeah, it's interesting. And they were at the insurrection as well. But
So they were at January 6th.
yeah, they were there on the stage with Trump. Yeah, they spoke. Yeah. Yeah. So Rochelle Garza has taken on Ken Paxton in the whole women's health care issue, and she's actually won a lawsuit against him. And this is somebody who is representative of Texas. She is from the Rio Grande Valley. She'd be the first Latina for that, and it's a woman, and she's so strong. And we really want to pump her up, and I can't wait for her to be my next attorney general.
That's super exciting. That's so
Yeah.
exciting. And what was
Mhm.
the reaction, out of curiosity of Texans to Governor Abbott just taking, immigrants and sticking them in Martha's Vineyard? And I was in an Uber driver the other day going to synagogue for the high holidays, and my Uber driver was like, "Oh, I was behind this van that just literally just like dumped these people on Kamala Harris's lawn and just left them there."
Oh, wow,
Like,
you
he was
actually
like, I
saw
was
it.
behind the van. Yeah, he said, "It's just
Ah,
this van just, like, this unmarked van just comes up, just, like, opens its doors, lets these people out,
mhm,
and drives away."
right.
I mean, it's, like, so bonkers. I mean,
Yeah,
what's people's perceptions in Texas of how Abbott is dealing with immigration?
depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, what they don't talk about is the reality of this. These people that they're dropping off at Martha's Vineyard and at Kamala's house, these are people who came legally seeking, oh my gosh.
Asylum.
Thank you so much. I was losing my words. They came here legally seeking asylum from countries that we're seeing most of them from Colombia, Venezuela, so many that they're coming in droves because of what's happening there. It's like they feel they have no other choice. Um, but the narrative plays out that these are like people crossing the borders illegally. Uh,
Mm,
and the Republican narrative on border security is that, Biden is soft on border security. We have to do something. It was why Abbott, stopped the supply chain when he was checking every, truck that came in. Uh, Causing billion I think it was over a billion that we lost on that little venture, not to mention Operation Lone Star. But the narrative, it just depends on who you speak with. It's basically Beto and the Democrats are just for open borders and
what is your view on immigration, Gwen?
so I'm of the perspective. I do not think that anyone wants our borders to not be secure. Of course we do. I don't know that a wall is necessarily the answer because we've tried that, and it's a lot of land to put a wall on. We've got to come up with other strategies. Also, those that need to be more humane. That's one of the things that we need to look at. But yeah, there are a lot of solutions that should be done by a lot of people smarter than me on the border. But this he said, she said, or they said thing is not helping anybody and it's solving nothing. So can
Mm.
we all come together and come up with some real solutions instead of just blaming the other guy, especially at election time?
Yeah, I have a friend. It's like people think Biden's so soft on immigration. I have a friend, LGBTQ activist from Zimbabwe, has had death threats against her life. She was in the US seeking asylum for the last 5 years, and her asylum claim was rejected. She was deported to back to Zimbabwe, where she's had death threats. She's now fled to South Africa. She's trying to get a visa to Canada. She's like, I'm trying to help her get a job in Canada and help her financially. She should absolutely have gotten asylum, and she didn't. So, our immigration system rejects people under both administrations that really are well deserving, and
Right.
deserve it as much as my grandparents who escaped anti-Semitism in Poland, right? And
Oh, yeah.
wherever your family history comes from, so many
Mhm.
of our families came escaping persecution, and
Right.
people seem to forget that.
Yeah, they forget
So
we're a nation of immigrants.
we're a nation of immigrants. And immigrants are
Yeah,
huge job suppliers.
right.
Immigrants work the hardest and they also pick the food that we eat. People don't realize that, I've had students that were from Mexican Americans and like they worked in the fields as kids.
Mhm.
Literally, it's like the salad that you ate at lunch today, like the vegetables were probably picked by Mexican Americans or by
Right.
Mexicans. And
Mhm.
people don't understand that like Americans don't want to go work in the fields making bupkis, picking, the
Right.
corn at, one of my students used to go at 4 a.m. to
Yeah.
pick food before school and then after, when she was 8 years old.
Right.
Like her family worked really hard to be able to stay in the US,
Right.
and that's people don't acknowledge that hard
Yeah.
work.
And was she a dreamer? She
She
that's the
was she a dreamer? I think her parents, I'm not sure actually. She might be a dreamer, I'm not sure.
Mhm. That's the one thing too. We look at, that was a good, you know, temporary program, but the what we see what our dreamers have to go through to try and gain citizenship is there's no path for it as a
Yeah.
dreamer.
And they're
So
such
something's
hard
got to give.
workers. And they've lived here their whole lives. They don't,
Yeah.
bringing them back to Mexico to, some of them don't even
Mhm.
speak Spanish. It's like,
Right.
their spouses are here, their education is here, their jobs are here, and then it's just like just because, something that happened years ago, they're now gone.
Yeah.
Um, Anyway, so I want to let you go to your next event, but how can people help you win this race? What can they do? Please tell everybody.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So yeah, we are in this final stretch, and I got to tell you, your dollars will really, really help. We have paid canvassers. We're also doing our streaming ads on YouTube and on Hulu. And it's because we want to reach those younger voters. They don't want our mailers. We've already sent our mailers out to them.
I
They,
check
we
my
got to
mail
reach
and I
them where
just
they
get
are.
overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my God, there's so
Yeah.
many flyers. I
There's
can't
so
handle
many
it.
flowers. We already got those to those people. So we really want to focus on our younger voters, but also we need block walkers bad. We have had to switch gears. Normally we have this thing called get out the vote. And that's where you pass out, you just leave your literature at the door. Unfortunately, we know that the data is not helping with that. And here in Texas, we've seen from our early voting that we are not showing up in the numbers that we did in
Mm,
2018. So we have switched to going back to knocking on doors, and we need more folks for that. So we would love if you could sign up to volunteer. We are on Mobilize America. Just look. My last name is Burud, B like boy, URUD. You can find us there, or you can go to my website, sign up. That's Burud, BURUD, for Texas.com.
awesome. So it sounds like donate, 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 and
Yeah.
hit the streets.
Hit
Like
the
I was saying
street.
before, like talking to
Yeah.
voters really does it. It's so impactful. It's also just a really powerful experience to knock on doors.
Mhm.
To talk to strangers. I think it's some of the most
Yeah.
humanizing experiences that I've had in my life has been
Mhm.
knocking, on doors in all Black neighborhoods,
Yeah.
all Latino neighborhoods,
Yeah.
like really just hearing people's perspectives. It's such a humanizing, enriching life experience, like beyond just getting out the vote that I think everybody
Right.
frankly should have. So
Yes, yeah, and the data says that is the most effective
it
way,
really
so
is. It really
mhm.
is. Awesome. So make sure you go to Gwen's website. Say it one more time. It's burudfortexas.com.
Yes, and the
And
Burud is that BURUD.
BURUD, and go to Mobilize America if you want to
Uh-huh.
volunteer and help get out the vote. Gwen,
Yes.
thank you so much for coming on the
Oh,
show. I wish you the best of luck in this race, and I
thank
applaud
you, Samantha.
your going back to the beginning and saying, "No one's running against him. You know what? I'm going to run." I mean, that's what we as women need to do, is to be like, "Oh, there's an open seat," and not wait for somebody else and say, "Well, they're a politician. They're not I'm not a politician." Like, nobody's a politician. This guy is a freaking chemical manufacturer, fracking. Sounds like, I don't know, unethical, climate change, anti-abortion lunatic. So,
Yeah, there you
I
go.
love that you just said, I'm going to run. Like, as somebody who teaches women's leadership, that element of just like, sometimes it's like, okay, it's time. Like, no more excuses. Take the risk. If you're going to fail, fail fabulously, and let's go. So, Gwen, thank you for coming on the show. Have a great event tonight,
Oh,
and best of
thank you.
luck. I can't wait to see what happens in your race.
Oh, thank you so much, Samantha. I so enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great night, Gwen.
You too.
So that was Gwenn Burud, who's running in Texas in a very competitive district, and clearly a pioneer of education. She really cares about climate change, clean air and clean water. I mean, reproductive rights. It's just so horrifying hearing what's happening to people in terms of reproductive rights. I frankly didn't know that Texas has such high maternal mortality rates, abstinence only education, even though they have the second highest rate of teen pregnancy within the US, and of repeat teen pregnancy. That's also horrifying. Not sure, I can't imagine myself having taken care of a child adequately when I was 16 years old or 14 or 18. My mom probably would have taken care of the child, which, not a way to raise a kid. So I want to encourage you to vote for her, to volunteer for her, and to donate. Even if you're not in Texas, you can obviously donate, and you can probably make calls. So let's bring in our next guest from another swing state, Virginia. Susanna Gibson is a Democratic candidate for the Virginia House of Delegates in the 57th District. She is a lifelong Virginian and Democrat. She's a graduate of both the University of Virginia and Columbia University, not too shabby, and has worked as a nurse practitioner and a public health expert in Richmond for 15 years. She's cared for patients in all sorts of specialties, including geriatrics, emergency medicine, internal medicine, and obesity medicine. And she has extensive experience managing the most medically complex patients in Virginia, and a track record of effectively utilizing local and state resources to best help those in need. She also was a key leader in the CMS independence at home demonstration process. She helped create, start, and lead the VCU Center for Advanced Health Management, a medical home model managing the most complex adult patients in Virginia, and so much more. Her priorities include defending reproductive rights, putting an end to the gun violence epidemic, addressing Virginia's lack of mental health and substance use disorders, and improving Virginia's infrastructure and resources to support aging citizens. She is running in the Virginia House of Delegates in the new 57th District in Western Henrico County. This is a new open seat with no incumbent, which is super interesting. That is a 2-point margin race in one of the most competitive districts in Virginia. Her website is susannagibson.com. Now, Susanna's district also went about 51% for Youngkin, who is the Republican governor of the state now, and 49% for Terry McAuliffe, who was the previous Democratic governor of Virginia. So there's really no telling what will happen. Susanna, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I am excited to be here.
I'm so excited. So what's your why, Susanna?
So I've been trying to come up with a succinct way of saying this. I'm still struggling a little bit. So as you said, I'm a nurse practitioner. I actually have a degree in religious studies from UVA, Christianity and African religions. I thought I wanted to go to law school. I don't know what I was thinking. And during my time at UVA, I volunteered at the UVA Teen Health Center, which is a nurse practitioner run center, and just fell in love with reproductive health, and decided to go back to school to become a nurse practitioner to work in reproductive health and adolescent medicine. And funnily enough, I did go back to school, but I ended up working in geriatrics and internal medicine for most of my career. But reproductive health is something that has always been a passion of mine. And when the Dobbs decision came out this summer, for those of you who don't know, when Roe was reversed, it was essentially the straw that broke the camel's back for me. And I already volunteer at Planned Parenthood here in Virginia, and I'm already involved in the National Women's March, but I thought, what else can I do? And this particular seat had just opened up. Virginia has redistricted based on the 2020 census, but we have yet to have our state elections to reflect that. And the old Republican incumbent actually got moved out of the district and he can no longer run. So I am running, and I'm running hard because I'm determined to do something about this in Virginia.
When you say you're determined to do something about this, are you talking about the assault on reproductive rights? Like, what issue is really paramount to, it sounds like Roe v. Wade is incredibly important. So
that is my driving. Really, I mean, truly it is the assault on not just reproductive rights, but on women, right? Women, girls, because that is truly what it is. And that is what it's about. It's about power. And they are using our bodies, our lives to, as political sound bites, right? To further political agendas, no matter what the cost is to myself, you, my sisters, my neighbors, my daughter, right? And I'm just not going to let that happen.
I think that's so, the way you put that is really, really beautiful. They are using our bodies and our lives as political sound bites. And it's all about power. And
it is.
And I had an episode called America's War on Women, and some jerk commented and was like, "Oh, your political bias is really clear." I was like, "I'm sorry, but if I voted and I had control over whether or not you had a vasectomy, would you be angry at me? Would you consider that? Or on whether or not you could have access to Viagra? Would you be angry at me? Like, like, I'm not making any decisions about a man's body. So why should a man make any decisions about my body? They don't, but it's so ingrained into the expectation of America that there's this control of women. And that's something that I think we really need to push back on. Like, our bodies, our choice, our lives, our choice. Like, you cannot control us.
And it's something that's so deeply ingrained from such a young age too. Because people have been asking me, well, so why are you just running now? Have you ever thought about running before? And I say, of course, right? So my mom worked for McGovern. She worked for Jimmy Carter. She was chairman of the Charlottesville City School Board forever. And I've always thought about it, but truly deep down, when I was growing up, I don't know how old you are. I'm almost 40, but when I was growing up, everyone started saying, "Oh, girls, you can be whatever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do." But there was never a female face in our government to put towards that for me. And it took a lot of self-reflection and motivation, and motivated by now anger and fear for what our country and Virginia is evolving into, to get past that deeply ingrained, well, I don't know if I can do it because there's never been a female, whatever it may be, president of the United States, or at the time when I was growing up, no female vice president of the United States, no governor. So, but it's something that's ingrained in us from a very, very, very young age, that sexism.
And you can't be what you can't see. Like, it really is like that. The other thing that's so interesting, I encourage people to watch the documentary Misrepresentation if you can find it in your library. But it's that girls want to run for office in equal numbers as boys until a certain age, and then it's like after age 12, all of a sudden that drops. They don't want to be president anymore. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with just like hypersexualization in the media, demeaning, body image issues, the way that society just like runs down girls. And that girls, they start to believe that their voice doesn't matter in politics.
Mhm.
And I think that that's, hopefully changing as we're seeing Gen Z be, and millennials be enraged in a way that I don't think any generation ever was, and committed to social purpose in a way that they never were before.
Yes.
But absolutely, it starts at a very, very early age.
Yep. I see it in my daughter. I have a 7-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, and the confidence in their intelligence, I will say, is remarkable from a very young age, noticeable. And I have made sure to parent them the exact same way. They've had the exact same education, gone through the same schools, all of those things.
So as a nurse practitioner, why is it important that abortion stay, it's still legal in Virginia, right? But why is it important that it stay legal in Virginia? Why is it important that abortion is legal from the viewpoint of a healthcare practitioner? Why is it important that you make the decision on what happens and the person, and not the government?
Hold on.
Got the boys coming in?
Out. Love you. Out.
No. Competing priorities as women. This is what we do.
No, out. I'm not kidding you. One. My daughter came in. She needs Band-Aid. I told you I'm hiding in the bathroom from them. So the reason that it's important for abortion to be legal in Virginia is because abortion is healthcare. I mean, that is just point blank, period. Not negotiable, not debatable. It is healthcare. And the best healthcare policy is made based on scientific facts, right? And not on the political whims of politicians. Abortion is an essential part of healthcare. So we're talking about women's right to survival, looking at our maternal mortality rates, right, in the United States are abysmal, but also looking at pregnancy-related complications. So the treatment for ectopic pregnancies, the treatment for miscarriages, right? Those are...
Sorry, I'm laughing because I'm remembering, I can't remember what Republican was like, well, can't you just, in an ectopic pregnancy, can't you just pull it out of the tube and stick it in the uterus? It was like no understanding of science or how women's bodies work. I was like, bonkers.
Exactly right. That is exactly right. And so in our Virginia General Assembly, there is one nurse practitioner in the House of Delegates, Dawn Adams. She's fantastic. And there is Siobhan Dunavant, who is in the Senate, who is a OBGYN, who is a pro-life Catholic OBGYN, who does not necessarily practice how she governs. And with the redistricting, so we're talking about running for the 2023. Virginia and New Jersey have their off-year election cycles, and abortion is absolutely on the ballot. Abortion right now, reproductive health right now in Virginia is already in a precarious state. So the Virginia General Assembly, in our House of Delegates, the Republicans have a 3-seat majority. And now, post redistricting, there are 8 seats in Virginia that are actually able to be flipped. So turned from conservative to Democrat. And the seat that I am running in is one of them. And it is actually probably the most competitive of all of them, because it is an open seat. It's a new district. It's a 51 Youngkin, 49 McAuliffe district estimated. And truly, I think it's even better than that. It is the suburbs of Richmond. It is cul-de-sac families. And every single month, there are younger and younger families moving in, and the district is becoming more and more Democratic. But this is why this matters, right? So reproductive health choice, that is why this particular election and this seat matters. In the Senate right now, for the Virginia State Senate, the Democrats have a 1-seat majority. That 1 seat is held by Joe Morrissey, who, I don't know if you know who Joe Morrissey is. He is a pro-life Catholic state senator who has quite the checkered past and a pretty poor reputation. But it's absolutely on the ballot, and it is vitally important that Democrats and pro-choice Democrats actually take the majority in the Virginia House in 2023. And because of that, I am running. And I'll tell you what, I got in. There are 2 men, of course, who decided to file and run before I did. They decided 2 months before I did, because I am in it and I'm in it early, but they got in it even earlier because of the competitiveness.
And they're running as Republicans?
One is running as a Republican, one is running as a Democrat. They are both 60-year-old and over white men. So the Virginia General Assembly is 29% women. And the majority of those men are over the age of 55, and about half of that over 65. So
wow.
It's not surprising who I'm running against. But, even with a lot of the men, and there are some great men, right? But I truly believe that we need women at the table when decisions are being made about women's bodies and women's lives. So they can sympathize, but they don't actually know truly what it's like. It's not their body, right, on the line.
Right. They're not the one that has to sit there with sepsis and sit at their house and wait for their body to deconstruct and wonder if they're going to die just so they can get healthcare.
Yeah. So saying, as the father of daughters does not work for me. No, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you actually doing to help us, help women, advocate for us?
And protect their lives. It was so interesting. I just did a show on Iran, on the protests in Iran, with women. And, my guest was saying she feels like, and I don't know about this, but I kind of agree. She was like, something that's so unique right now in Iran is that there's so many men that are standing up for women's rights now in Iran. Like, they are alongside the women. They are protecting them. They are helping them. They are advocating for them. And she's like, I don't see that in America. And she's kind of right. Like, I don't see, there's some men at the pro-choice rallies, but I mean, I'm also in
stand
DC.
out.
Yeah, I'm also in DC because it's 97% Democrat. So I have no idea what it looks like in other places. But we need men advocating not just for our rights, but for our lives. I mean, maternal mortality was predicted in places where it's overturned to go up by 40%.
Yep.
40% with the overturning.
People don't understand that, and they don't understand why, and they don't think about, well, right. So the way, and I could get all into this, but essentially they're not thinking about hypertension. They're not thinking about gestational diabetes. They're not thinking of uncontrolled bleeding, right? And how that affects maternal mortality, but also later on down the road, right? So gestational diabetes doubles your increased risk of developing diabetes, type 2 diabetes, later on in life, right? Which shortens your lifespan, increases risk of cardiovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, all of these things. So people are not really truly understanding the downstream implications and why that is so important for women's health, right? It's a challenge, but it is one that is so important and so necessary.
Let's switch gears, Susanna. I want to talk about gun violence because we have a gun violence epidemic.
Yes, we do.
And yet, like I was saying earlier, there's somehow the Republican Party has painted itself as the protectors of law, order, and safety, and painted as the Democrats as weak on crime, even though, Republicans are the ones running around with their assault weapons. So,
voting not to
implement any common sense gun reforms, even though most Americans do support them. So what would you do about gun violence?
So as I think a scientist and nurse practitioner, right, a healthcare provider, I am big into evidence-based policy. Yes. And Johns Hopkins actually has a wonderful gun violence prevention center. And I believe it is partnered with Bloomberg. And they study, in particular, gun violence intervention programs. And so a lot of what that is, and particularly here when I'm thinking about Virginia and the actual district that I represent, there's a bunch of things we can do, implementing community violence intervention programs, hospital-based intervention programs. So, of course, strengthening licensing laws and red flag laws and these things. But there are other interventions we can do as well that should be able to make a huge difference. So
what is community-based interventions? What does that mean?
So community-based interventions and hospital-based interventions are essentially when these patients come into the hospital system or when these patients or people become identified by the social workers or community systems in place. And there are a bunch of different interventions they do, but one of those is having outreach. So specific outreach to people who are at the most risk for gun violence, to discuss retaliation, other options, resources in the community, and really like a mentorship program as well, but supporting people. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about those hospital-based intervention programs. And then there are other common sense things we can do, aka what they call like making this public spaces cleaner and greener. So cleaning up abandoned parking lots, tearing down abandoned buildings, improving street lighting, right? All of these things have been shown to actually make a significant improvement in the decreasing of gun violence. And so truly looking at the data and the studies, I think is going to be the most important thing, because when you're talking about such an issue that is so controversial and hotly debated, again, I'm not quite sure why, but using data and facts to actually and saying, hey, this is actually the true evidence. This has been shown to do this. Why don't we implement that? Using numbers and data and studies is, I think, one of the ways that I would be able to talk to people on the other side and make small incremental changes towards reducing gun violence. Of course, I feel that there's no place for assault-style weapons on the streets. They should not be available. They have no place in our society. Weapons of war, right, should not be on our streets.
Right. Even my friends in the military are like, wow, I don't understand. Like, why would normal citizens have assault weapons? It doesn't make, and like, you're worried about someone breaking into your home? Fine, have your one-shot pistol. Why do you need an assault weapon? What exactly is the point of that you don't necessarily know how to use anyway? You know, and I mean, I think the other thing that's really important to point out is that gun violence is a women's issue. That if there's a gun in the house,
absolutely is domestic violence. And actually, I was going to say October, but it's now November. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I have been the victim of stalking, so not gun violence or not domestic violence, but looking at the stalking laws as well, and they need to be reformed. But that actually really strongly ties into those gun violence prevention issues.
Yeah, it's like the likelihood, I think, of you know, if there's a gun in the house of domestic violence turning into femicide, it's like, I think it's times 10, something like that. I mean, it's just it's so incredibly stark. Also, reports are showing that more children than ever are being killed by gun violence. The numbers have really gone up in terms of kids. So the likelihood, you know, people have a gun in the home, that actually a kid is going to find the gun and kill himself, versus, or the, you know, people don't look at gun violence and the risk of suicide. That if there's a gun in the house, and this ties into mental health care, right? If there's a gun in the house, the risk of suicide also, I think it triples. So because you know, you can't go back from shooting yourself in the head. Like that's not
right.
There's no coming back for that. So and that's actually becomes more of a men's issue, because more men actually die from suicide than women do. Even though more women attempt suicide, because men are more likely to use guns.
They are.
That's an issue that men should be concerned about, frankly, as well, is suicide rates that they don't really pay attention to. So these all sound, you know, incredibly important. Any other things that you want to bring up that you think are important for this race, that you want to tell people about yourself or about the issues that you stand for?
I think, you know, one of the things that is not necessarily super sexy, right, to talk about, but is so important, especially in Virginia, is improving our infrastructure to support our aging adult population, which is the fastest growing population in Virginia. We are not prepared for that. And it is coming whether we are prepared or not. We do not have the support staff to staff our assisted living facilities, our nursing homes. And there are a lot of reasons behind that I could get into, but we don't have enough affordable housing for our seniors, and that really needs to be addressed quickly. And so our senior population is one that is neglected. It is not the the hot topic of the day, probably never will be, but it's something that's vitally important to Virginia.
And everyone gets old. Nobody's excluded. There's not a single person here that's excluded from that experience, including all of the plus 60-year-old men you just talked about.
That is also true. So they should vote for me.
Yeah.
But, it's something that is near and dear to my heart. The first half of my career, I worked as the lead nurse practitioner for the VCU Division of Geriatrics. And VCU is the big medical teaching hospital here in Richmond and in the state, and did house calls. So VCU actually has a primary care program for people who are homebound. And I helped run that program. And for 7+ years, I went in and out of these patients' homes. It was predominantly elderly, but some younger patients as well. And, when you see the challenges that they're facing, social isolation and how that plays into their health, it is something that has been deeply ingrained in me to care for that population.
Of course, as it should be. And my mom had a knee replacement recently, and I took care of her. I took care of her for a week. She'll tell you I didn't do anything, but I took care of her for a week, and I was losing my mind.
You have to lose your mind. Caregiver strain is a huge issue.
I was trying to work, but I had to get my mom up to go to the bathroom, and I had to sleep there just in case she had an emergency, and I had to track her pills and make sure she wasn't taking too much of the same thing, and I eventually was like, why is there no state support? So we called, and they basically said, and this is in Connecticut, which has great resources, and they said they would send somebody twice a week, but the only purpose of that person was to help her take a shower. Yep. So they could come for 1 hour twice a week,
yep,
but just to take a shower. I was like, well, what about all the other stuff? Right. And like, my mom's lucky that I came home, but even after a week, I was like, Mom, I love you. I'm losing my mind over here. Like, my women's leadership students will tell you, I tell them that, I'm always talking about compassion and kindness and generosity. And I said, I am not a feminist leader when I do not sleep and do not exercise. I am like in tears. I'm a basket case. I can't focus. I'm irritable.
You sound just like me.
Oh, I can't do it. And so my parents ended up hiring somebody private that charged $25 an hour. And my mom's knee replacement recovery took months. And that's, we have my parents have the resources to do that. But what about the people that don't have the resources to do that?
That's what I was going to say. So Medicaid will pay for a personal care aide for up to 30 hours a week to come into the home and help patients with bathing and cooking and all the things. Medicare doesn't. And it is ungodly expensive and unaffordable for most of our elderly. And that's a big problem that needs to be addressed. But you're exactly right. I mean, caregiver strain and stress is something that we see time and time again, and which also leads to a lot of abuse and neglect of our elderly population as well.
That's so sad. And, women, we talk a lot about childcare, right? But women often, I see this in teaching women's leadership, women get stuck with both. The majority of elderly care goes to women, and the majority of childcare goes to women.
Yep.
And women are trying to work. And now you have these draconian abortion laws for, like, God forbid they have kids they don't want. And it's like,
We've taken women out of the workforce.
Right. How are you ever supposed to get ahead? It's just like, throw me a freaking bone over here.
That is exactly right. Our ability to work is directly tied to our ability to survive and thrive and our autonomy.
Right. So what can people do to support you in this last stretch? I'm convinced. I wish I was voting in your district. Maybe I'll come knock on doors for you this weekend. I do live near Virginia. But what can people do to help out in this last stretch to help you win this race?
So I need all the support, all the advocacy. Word of mouth is amazing. Just talking to friends and family. Truly, when one person reaches out to someone directly that they know, it is so much more impactful. So people just saying, hey, have you heard about this woman? She is running in this district and she is fantastic. I know her, or I've heard her speak and I think she's fantastic. That goes a very, very long way. In terms of what else I need. So when we're talking about being able to reach voters, talk to voters, get my message across to voters, the most important thing, unfortunately, and we could talk about Virginia campaign finance and the need for reform, because that is a whole nother podcast episode. I could go on and on. But the importance is I need money, and I need money to be able to reach voters via television, via mail, via digital. All of these things are ungodly expensive. And it's hard raising money right now with the congressional races going on. People don't understand or really think about how important their state and local politics and offices are to them, but they are vitally important. And encouraging people to vote in those state and local elections is also something huge that people can do. But donations, any kind of contribution to help me reach voters would be amazing as well.
And how can people donate, Susanna? Where do they go to donate?
So my website is susannagibson.com. It's SUSANNA Gibson, GIBSON.com. And there is a donate button right there. That is probably the easiest way for people. You can pay via Apple Pay or PayPal or credit card.
What about volunteering? We have a big DC contingency that listens to this
podcast.
So how can they come volunteer for you?
So there is a volunteer link on my website as well, and you can sign up and we can reach out to them. This particular district, I think door knocking is huge here. It is so important. And so door knocking, postcard writing, because a lot of people are not comfortable knocking on doors. They say, oh, I'm not good at it. I personally love it. It's the joy of campaigning is talking to people and getting to know people and listening to what issues they actually care about, because you cannot be an effective legislator. You cannot be an effective representative if you don't actually spend the time talking to people in your district that you're supposed to represent.
I want to repeat that for 1 second. You cannot be an effective legislator if you do not spend time talking to the people in the district that you represent, which is also
exactly right.
When we talk to Olivia later, talking about some of these races where people don't even live in the district and they're somehow running there. Anyway, another story, but I think that is absolutely incredibly important.
It is. And a lot of people don't take the time to do that. And that is the joy of this. And one of the things I'm best at is listening and talking, and I actually care. So, but door knocking is great, but postcard writing, phone banking, all of the things are vitally important as well. And I am grateful for every single person who volunteers. So.
Awesome. Well, so I hope you all will consider volunteering for Susanna at susannagibson.com, SUSANNA Gibson.com. Consider volunteering. Join me in donating. I'm donating to both of the campaigns of the women that were on the show tonight. So please join me in donating to them. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we can all go canvassing this weekend. Richmond is not that far from DC. So, Susanna, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And I also, I think it really is an interesting arc to think about, the contributions of not just you as a woman, but as a female, healthcare provider. There's so many nuances to that. I mean, I heard it come out in gun violence. I heard it come out in caring for geriatric populations. I heard it come out in terms of reproductive rights. And you can tell that you really genuinely care about taking care of people.
Yes, I do. Nurses are a good group of people generally, but yeah, I do.
And that's being a public servant, is taking care of people. So I think you'd make a tremendous public servant. And I hope that everybody here really mobilizes on your behalf, Susanna.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I will talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So we're going to take a quick break to see a video from our sponsor, and then we will be right back. Either we'll continue streaming here, or we might just start a new episode since we're going long here, but we still have one more guest, Olivia Logan. So don't leave this podcast. So I do want to thank our sponsor, which is the Women's Leadership Challenge, which is the class that I teach when I am not doing this show. It is a 6-month transformational leadership course. I love it. I love training women just to step into their power, figure out how to change the world, whether it's running for office, starting a nonprofit, getting a promotion, getting a raise, advocating for other women, advocating for the things that they care about. We have to be outspoken because we are often in the in legislation, we are in the minority in both U.S. Congress, in the Senate, in state houses. As Susanna was saying, our voices need to be out there. In the corporate sector, there's more CEOs named John than there are women CEOs. So, we need to be at levels of power so that we can influence these decisions. So let's take a look at the Women's Leadership Challenge.
I took the Women's Leadership Challenge in early 2021.
Samantha told me before I started that this could possibly change my life. And you know what? I think it might have done.
It gave me the very breakthrough I needed.
Fulfilled me in so many ways.
Find all my senses through this class.
So welcomed me just as I was.
I believe that we need more women leaders in the world. Women leaders who lead in innovative, creative, courageous ways that are true to who they are, that aren't a manufactured version of what a man would do at the top. So we're going to do things like finding your purpose, but we're also going to do things like looking at how do you create institutional change. Your cohort will become your sisters that will support you, elevate, lift you up.
I highly recommend that any woman who's looking for a pivot, looking for a boost, feeling imposter syndrome, definitely recommend the Women's Leadership Challenge.
It's really been a wonderful, life-changing, empowering experience, and I hope that you will join it as well.
So as you saw, I'm incredibly proud of the Women's Leadership Challenge. You might recognize me in that video sitting in this office, also wearing navy blue, talking about it. But I'm incredibly proud. We have 85 women that are in the program or have participated in the program. Just last night when I was teaching, we do this thing at the beginning of class where we celebrate wins. And they can be, I call them process goals. It doesn't have to be a huge win. It could be, I did the dishes, or something that you don't like doing, or I finally, wrote an article and posted on LinkedIn. It can be small things, but I walked into class last night and I said, what are your wins? And I was blown out of the water. I mean, this cohort is in DC and they're in their 11th out of 15 classes. And someone came in wanting to write a book. She has finished the draft of the book and she got a publisher, and she just had her first speaking engagement about the book, which went really well. Another woman just started as a policy advisor, advising the undersecretary at the Department of Homeland Security, coming from previously being a conference coordinator. Huge career leap for her. We had another woman get 2 competing job offers from places that aligned with her values and places that she really felt like she wanted to work and felt like were really in values alignment and were big boosts in terms of pay that she was, trying to figure out which one to take. I'm blown away by the women in my program, but also by the results that I see. Another one decided to start her own LLC again and has her first client and didn't want to work for a company anymore. I just see the results are amazing. So if you want to be empowered, if you want to get a raise, if you want to write a book, if you want to run for office, if you want to start a nonprofit, this community of women really takes you and helps you to do that, along with our extensive leadership curriculum. So I encourage you to apply if you're interested. We are full for the virtual fall cohort, but we may have one spot left for the DC cohort, in which case I encourage you to book your discovery call now. And we're looking at the 2 cohorts for the spring are already starting to fill up. So if you're interested in any of those things and being part of an empowering community of women to lift you up and network you to success, you go to www.womensleadershipchallenge.com to learn more. And you can book a discovery call with me to find out, is it the right choice for you right now? What does the program look like? And I do a little bit of coaching with you on your goals, where you are, where you want to go, to see if this is the right fit for you at this point in your journey. And I'm pretty selective in terms of who I accept into the program as well. So that's the womensleadershipchallenge.com, which is a great segue to our next guest in the show, who is an alumni of the Women's Leadership Challenge. Olivia came into the program and she had just started her own political consulting firm. And that was about a year ago. And I was so delighted to see her expand her firm to consult with multiple candidates in competitive districts, start to hire under her. I'm amazed and impressed by her, as I know you will be. A little bit more about her. She's a seasoned strategist. She combines her experience, vast experience in political campaigns and nonprofits to provide outstanding consultation to her clients, which is mostly on fundraising, on voter outreach, on messaging, on all these different things it takes to run a campaign. She's a veteran of all different campaigns all over the country. She's worked alongside many influential policymakers, political strategists, and thought leaders to successfully execute grassroots and grasstops campaigns, and has been instrumental in raising millions of dollars for candidates, PACs, and other orgs throughout the country. As a former campaign and nonprofit professional, Olivia understands and relates to the very fast-paced political environment and is committed to going the extra mile to support her clients' needs. She graduated with a degree in psychology of human behavior and a minor in poli-sci and sociology from the University of the Ozarks in Clarksville, Arkansas. Olivia, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Excited to see you. So, based on what you've heard so far, anything that you felt like these are two of your candidates that you've been supporting? Anything you feel like either of them left out that you think is incredibly important to highlight about either of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think they both spoke eloquently about themselves, their election, and the challenges of that they're running up against in their districts. I think the biggest challenge right now for everyone that's running is we're in the midterms, and then next year we're in the off election year. So it's going to be important to focus on that voter turnout and building out the infrastructure needed to be successful in these elections.
Olivia, what's the name of your business now? It's Logan Strategies, right?
Logan Strategic Solutions.
Logan Strategic Solutions. Okay. So let's take, and Olivia has new puppies, which is, I'm sure, who's making noise right now. She is a dog lover, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Dog mom. So I want to get some intel on you on the Senate seats. So we saw that that map earlier. Zach, if you are able to bring that back up. If not, we saw that some of the that the Georgia Senate race, where Raphael Warnock is running against Herschel Walker, former NFL player who also paid for an abortion and claims to be running on an anti-choice stance. I guess he just will pay for them, but doesn't think women should get them. He is running against, so he is also a former NFL player. And Raphael Warnock is one of the ones that I talked about in terms of, being part of the blue wave in Georgia. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on where Warnock stands and in this election.
I want to be cautiously optimistic, but I mean, we've seen in other states like Alabama, when they pull people from the NFL and football because it's a whole different separate culture in the South, how that works in elections. I would love to see him get reelected. I don't know how it's going to go. I feel like the right people are rallying on Warnock's behalf. But I mean, Georgia's a tricky state. And they also just went through redistricting. So it's going to be close, but I feel cautiously optimistic.
And what do you think? What issues matter most to Georgia voters? Are they the ones that I've highlighted so far, or what's?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of concern around inflation and job creation, healthcare, education, like our bread and butter issues that are not being paid attention to by other elected officials that are currently in office.
So let's actually go that way for a second. Why does everybody think that Republicans are better at the economy?
So I think it's a messaging thing. I think Democrats have really struggled to formulate a message around the economy that is strong, and Republicans have dominated this for a decade or more even. And a lot of times their policies they put strangleholds on small business owners and people that want to just be independent and self-employed, and they legislate more towards supporting corporations, and they don't think about people who need an affordable living wage. They don't think about people who struggle to afford their health care or have a family of 4 and have 2 working parents and can't make ends meet, or they are barely making ends meet. And so I think we need to start messaging around that. Like some people have started messaging around that, but it's not strong enough. It's not loud enough.
And I think it's important to point out that, that Republicans are really about less taxes for the rich and hoping that less taxes for the rich have a trickle down effect.
But we have not seen that.
There is no trickle down effect.
There isn't. People just want to consolidate their own wealth, right, and hold it for themselves.
I'll never forget when one of my I have to say a shout out to Michael Hammond, my dad's golf buddy, and he said, Sam, this was the election between Hillary and Trump. He said, I'm voting for Hillary. He goes, I don't really want to. I don't like her. He said, but ultimately, Trump is a scumbag. And if you vote for Trump, all you care about is making your moat even bigger. And he's like, that is what it comes down to. Do you want to be richer? Do you care about social issues more, or do you want to be a richer person? And that's about higher. It's tax cuts among the wealthy. It's not actually being better within the economy. And the fact that inflation has to do a lot with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is beyond our control, with the COVID-19 pandemic, and also that oil and large corporations are making more profits. And if anything, we need to tax corporations, we need to tax the rich, and we need to tax oil companies and reduce their profits so it will be less for ours. And that's what Democrats are advocating for.
Yeah. And I mean, my thing is get these top 1%ers paying their fair share. Because even if they did that, it would be better than what we're doing now.
Yeah, I have a friend who is founder of a tech company, and he said, I'm the only rich guy that's he's a Democrat going, please take more of my money. He's like, how much money can you possibly need? This company is valued in the hundreds of millions. Why do I need all this money? Please take it.
So this brings up something really interesting. In 2014, I had just graduated college, and I was working on my first campaign, and I was part of the coordinated, so we were dabbling in a little bit of everything. So the main priority was to try to protect the Senate seat in Arkansas. And then we also were trying to pass a minimum wage increase on the ballot. And we did. And they have actually passed 2 more since then, I believe. At least 1. But I'm pretty sure there's been 2. And I was going around the mall asking people to sign the petition. And I didn't want to walk up to this guy because he looked very Republican and he was dressed in high fashion, had a Rolex. And he saw me getting these people to sign, and he walked up to me and he's like, what's that for? And I was like, well, it's a petition to increase the minimum wage. We would do it in moderation. So I don't know. How do you feel about that? He's like, oh my gosh, I make almost $3 million an hour running this Fortune 500 company, and my employees can't even barely afford, I want to give them more money. This would be fantastic. And he signed it. And I was like, man, I prejudged this guy based on what he looked like. And he's actually on our side.
There are some people that have souls.
Yeah. And so, but yeah, he was dripping with wealth. And I just was like, oh no, I'm not talking to this person. Be one of those people that wants to consolidate it and keep it for himself.
And that's our lesson too, right? As Democrats, is that we can't just like me and the guy walking into the Hillary's office being like, is that guy in the wrong place? We can't make assumptions either, right? And we have to to really, I think, get those people as advocates and pioneers. And I was joking with my dad that he should start Golfers Against Trump. I was like, Dad, come on, like start a boycott of all the Trump courses. You can start a Facebook group. My dad doesn't even know how to use Facebook, but I thought it would have been good. But yeah, like in terms of the economy, 16 years under Clinton and Obama, 33.8 million jobs were created. 18 months under Biden, 9.6 million jobs were created. And 16 years under Bush and Trump, 1.9 million jobs were created. So basically 5 times as many Biden jobs as the last 3 GOP people combined. So, the jobs growth is much higher under Democrats. It's not higher under Republicans at all.
Right.
So I just don't understand that people think that the Republicans are better at the economy.
I honestly, as I said earlier, I think it's a messaging thing. Like we have to step up to the plate and make our messaging more concise around the economy. I think the last person that ever really did that well was, Obama did a good job of like vocalizing it. I'm not so sure that he had the House or the Senate to back him to actually get it done the way that it should have been done. And then Bill Clinton.
Right? Like I said at the beginning of the show, right?
Yeah.
So just so people know, Democrats decreased federal spending by $550 billion and reduced our deficit by $1.4 trillion in 2022, which was the biggest single year drop in the deficit in American history. So, again, if you're concerned about the economy and you're thinking about the economy, you need to vote for Democrats unless you're making billions of dollars and you want tax cuts. I can't, it's true. Like Republicans support tax cuts for the rich. I can't say, but the fact is, like, do you really need? Do you need to make your moat any bigger? Like how many houses do you need? How many boats do you need?
Yeah.
So let's move on. Yeah, go ahead.
I had an interesting conversation with a former Republican a couple days ago, and she's like, it's amazing how much it's changed. Like the party has changed. Like it used to be we had a fundamental disagreement about how tax dollars are spent, but now we're like disagreeing on who qualifies to be a person with full rights in this country. Maybe a segue for the next topic.
Speaking of fiscal conservatism again, like beyond kids being born that then end up on the welfare system, the other irony is that Republicans waste so much time and money and energy doing things like transgender bans and regulating abortion. It's like we have serious problems in this country. Like our education system sucks. It's terrible. We have massive amounts of poverty. There's a lot of things that need to be done in this country, and you're spending your attention trying to make sure that someone who's transgender can or can't use the bathroom or play women's sports. Like, go deal with real issues. It's such bullshit.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing, like, as long as I've been involved in politics and I've listened to my parents and grandparents talk about politics, the issues haven't changed, but society keeps evolving. And they're not ready for that evolution because they can't even deal with the issues of the past.
That's interesting. Now, what about the Pennsylvania race? John Fetterman there is standing, a Democratic candidate, is standing off against Dr. Oz, who apparently you were saying doesn't even live in the district. So can you talk a little bit about how Fetterman stands and what issues are at stake in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so I've been keeping up with this race because I have family that live in Philadelphia. I also was in Pennsylvania for 2016 for Hillary. And Fetterman was actually, at the time, he ran in a primary against Katie McGinty for the Senate. And Katie got the nomination, but then he ran for lieutenant governor, won, and now he's running for governor. Senate, my bad. He is running for Senate. And Dr. Oz threw his hat in the ring, and he technically lives in the Philadelphia suburbs of New Jersey. So he's not even in the state of Pennsylvania. And then recently he's had some scandals come out about his scientific research studies that he ran that involved testing on puppies that were not ethical. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes things up. Pennsylvania is a pretty purple state. You pretty much have Harrisburg, which is the capital, then you have Philadelphia, and then you have Pittsburgh, and then everything in between is Pennsylvania, and it's very, for the most part, pretty conservative or moderate. So I'm really interested to see how things shake out. I feel cautiously optimistic about Fetterman. I think it is a challenge for somebody who doesn't even live in the state that they want to represent to get the nomination. We'll just see how the voters feel about that, though.
So another one of your candidates, Kate Turner in Kentucky, is running with a pro-choice messaging, but not the kind of pro-choice messaging you might think. So I wonder if you could dive a little bit into, it seems unheard of to run on pro-choice in Kentucky. How is she messaging that? What's going on there?
So her big thing is right now, because she's in her mid-30s, but she also is a consultant, works for herself, highly accomplished. She wants to put off having a family for right now. And so she wants to undergo, she's undergone IVF in another state because of concerns around the way that the abortion ban in Kentucky is messaged. It's very ambiguous and potentially impacts people's ability to have and plan families. And that is another choice outside of abortion that falls under that umbrella. And a lot of people also don't understand the process of IVF and how that is impacted under the abortion ban. And when she goes door to door, or
Olivia, can you explain the signs? How is that impacted under the abortion ban?
So a lot of times in IVF, you're selecting the best embryo to work with. And so at that time, you're picking who's viable and who's not. So at that time, are you killing a baby at that, if you're choosing a different embryo versus, And so the law doesn't explicitly say that IVF is banned, but I think in a gray space, if a doctor felt uncomfortable, they would be like, hey, we can't do this. We can't, it's not safe for us to be able to do this. And so I think that message is really hitting home to families that want to expand, but can't right now. And so they want to make and plan other options. And they may not be able to do that in the state of Kentucky or other states that have other bans as well. And so she's really done a good job of campaigning on this issue and making it universal. And both Democrats, Republicans, and independents have responded really well to her.
That's fantastic to see that people are responding well to that. Let's go with another candidate. Jessica Katzenmeier is running for Wisconsin State Senate, District 5. If elected, she would be the first openly transgender woman to hold the seat. What's most important about her race?
Yeah, so Wisconsin also had a trigger ban go into effect. They have a Democratic governor, but they need a state legislature that can back his veto of the abortion ban there. And so her seat is one of the targeted seats to protect the governor's veto so that they no longer have an abortion ban.
So basically, essentially, the governor's vetoes this, terrible abortion ban, and we need those seats as Democrats to protect that veto.
Yes.
Okay. Well, lastly, what about January 6th? We had these January 6th committee hearings where I think it became incredibly clear that Trump is the architect behind the insurrection and was recently indicted. Let's see if he actually decides to. Was he indicted or he was subpoenaed? Excuse me. He was subpoenaed.
He was subpoenaed, yeah.
He was subpoenaed. Let's see if he actually talks, because he will incriminate himself, so I hope he does. But do you think that, and then the other aspect of that is that we have a lot of people running for election on the Republican side who deny the election and say that, believe in the great lie, which was the whole reason that the insurrection happened in the first place, was Donald Trump saying this is an illegitimate election. You can't confirm Biden. He's not the real president. I'm the real president. Do you think people are voting at all based upon the January 6 hearings, or, how much has that impacted swing voters?
So it was really interesting at the start of the election cycle. It was a really hot topic. And it does come up. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but it's definitely, a lot of people have shifted, of course, to the economic concerns. But I do think that there is a certain constituency that is still paying attention to the January 6th hearings. And I actually think it's more of the election deniers, more so than the ones that actually believe the results of the election. It definitely, I think there will be some people that turn out and vote because they do not, they feel one way or the other about January 6th.
But when you say election deniers are paying more attention, in what way?
So I think a lot of the media that they consume, because there is no substance on that side of the aisle right now, as far as what these elected officials and candidates are running on, they get fed with January 6th. The election was rigged, and they go off of what they hear. I think that type of brainwashing can be very difficult to overcome. So we'll see how that goes this cycle.
Yeah, I really wish that YouTube and Facebook and tech companies would take accountability for the fact that, they send people down to rabbit holes. That you click on one thing saying the election is rigged, and the next video you're fed, frankly, should be why the election was not rigged. But they want you to click on it. And if you see why the election was not rigged, that's not what you want to hear. You want confirmation bias from what you already believe. So they send you further and further down these rabbit holes of conspiracy theorists. It's like, starting at light, and then all of a sudden you're in QAnon. So, I really wish, that tech companies would take responsibility and say, and even for Democrats, you know what? Fine, show me a Fox News clip after I read MSNBC. I would love to see it. I want to hear alternative viewpoints as well. And yet we are in these, this information bubble that just, you start here and you end up here. And especially as we defriend, relatives and friends who are not the same political views as us from Facebook and whatever, or Twitter, then we hear even less, and we're in our own echo chambers.
Oh yeah. Well, and I've gotten to the point, I used to be on social media all the time in junior high and high school. And then after my first 2 or 3 elections, I got social media fatigue because of all the information or disinformation that gets spread through these channels. And there was one point in time, I don't know if Twitter is still doing this, but someone would post something that was extremely biased, and then they would have a notation at the bottom of the tweet or the image or whatever that would highlight that this is embellished. Here's the truth. And I would be okay with that if more platforms would also highlight that, okay, we're taking this to the nth degree versus actually sharing real viable information.
Right. So because this has been a really long show, I want to go towards your business. What types of clients do you serve? What services do you provide? Tell us a little bit more about Logan Strategic Consulting
Solutions. Yeah.
Logan Strategic Solutions, which was a at birth when I had you in my class. So
Yeah.
tell us about the types of clients you serve. Obviously, these two women on the show are examples, and what kind of services you provide.
So right now, like in the past, I have done all levels of government from the federal all the way down to local. And then I've also done PACs and organizations. But right now, my main focus is actually the state ledge, especially since we're watching a lot of federal legislation and legislation from the Supreme Court kick things back to the states. It's going to be really crucial for us to pick up the state ledges. And I have been working in politics for almost 14 years now, roughly. And over and over and over again, I hear Democrats talking about how, oh, we need to build a bench, but no one's actually proactively building a bench. And then there are certain organizations that come in and try to do it, but they don't have either the capacity or the experience. And so they really need the support to be able to do that. And so
can you explain to people if they don't understand what does building a bench mean?
Yeah. So when I talk about building a bench, the Republicans did this in the early 2000s. They went in and particularly the Koch brothers and bought school board seats. And then they worked their way up from the school board and went to like municipalities. So your mayoral and city council offices. Then they went to the state ledge. And then they went to statewide offices. And then they took the federal offices. And they did it. They played the long game and organized everything from that very, very grassroots level and just went all the way to the top. We have a tendency to go for the glamour campaigns. So like anyone that gets on MSNBC or CNN and delivers political platitudes that we love hearing, but they can't actually act on it. And we're just like, yeah, we're going to support this person and give them all the money. And it's like, well, follow what they've actually done and been able to do. And then we forget about everything else under that level of government. And that's why we're struggling. And that's why we've fallen behind in so many other states. And that's why certain states that used to be purple are now like being deemed red. But really, we need to get back to the fundamentals of organizing at the grassroots.
Yeah. I'm reading this book, How Change Happens, by I think it's Leslie Crutchfield. And she talks basically about how all successful movements, they start at the state level. They don't start at the top. They start local, grassroots. They have, organizers that are organizing not just in election years, but all the time. And that makes such a difference. And, that the movements that just try to target the top, they're not sustainable. They don't have the impact and she talks about gun control as being one of them, that they haven't focused on a state by state strategy, whereas the NRA has really, really strong state chapters that are, pivotal to the NRA winning the big wins. I think building the bench and your work. So you mostly, when you say you work with down ballot candidates, you're talking about state house, you're talking about state senate. Is that correct?
So I do predominantly state house and state senate, but then I will also work with mayoral and city council and school board races as well. Eventually I'll go back to the statewide and the federals, but right now it's so important to focus on these races.
And what services do you provide, Olivia?
So predominantly I focus on the fundraising piece, especially this early in the 2023 cycle. I do also do general consulting though. So I can develop field plans and voter outreach plans. We also do communications plans. I have a network of people that I can connect other candidates to for digital services. Let's see, what else? I mean, that's pretty much it. I am going to start doing candidate trainings outside of actually providing services for people that may or may not be able to afford having direct service. So they can come in and join training sessions at a lower cost. I know what's unique about the work that I'm about to do in Virginia is I'm working through an organization called Commonwealth Forward, and they are having me work with their endorsed candidates. And so it helps other candidates that wouldn't be able to afford me off the bat to be able to have the kind of service to run an effective campaign. And so essentially Commonwealth Forward pays me to work with them. That's not always the case in other states. Some states will also have the House or Senate caucuses provide support. And so they'll pay for it as an in-kind and it'll come from the House or Senate caucus. But I mean, a lot of these states are not that organized. You usually find that in the more purple states. Everywhere else, it's kind of just hit or miss whether or not candidates have the right support.
How can people contact you if they're interested in your services?
Yeah, so my email is olivia@logan-strategies.com. We are working on getting the website up and running, but it will be www.logan-strategies.com. And I will announce it on all my social media platforms once it is up and running.
Awesome, Olivia. Lastly, if you could tell people, a little bit about your experience with the Women's Leadership Challenge, especially as to how it helped you grow your business, that would be.
Yeah, definitely. So it was really funny. I actually found you through a mutual friend who we did campaign work together. And I watched your podcasts that we're conveniently on right now. And then I was like, okay, I need to know more about this.
And now you're a guest. Look at this.
Now I'm a guest. Yeah. And so I clicked on your Facebook and I saw the Women's Leadership Challenge. And I was like, I'm just starting my business. I mean, this might be worth it. I mean, the podcast was good. Obviously, the training will be good. So I filled out the form and then we had a phone call and then I was like, all right, I'm in. And it was super helpful in terms of being able to make the decision. I was kind of just flying by the seat of my pants before. And I did have business partners and it gave me like the guidance to be able to separate from that, effectively start another business and then grow it and actually feel confident in growing it. And then not to mention, like, we have a supportive network of women and just that have been wonderful. And it's also nice to be able to connect with them outside of the leadership challenge and talk one-on-one. I don't know. I mean, it's just it's so hard to find supportive women leadership organizations. And I think that's why a lot of women don't go into business or they find it really difficult to figure out where to start because they don't have an opportunity like this to be able to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Olivia. And Olivia's in the extension mastermind, the leadership mastermind that we have as an option when people finish the program. Olivia, I really want to thank you so much for coming on Samanthropolitics tonight. Delighted to have you as a guest. You're such a savvy political strategist, and it's really cool to see these women and hear from them that you have supported to run. So I wish you the best on November 8th with all of your candidates who I know are all in very competitive district, and you've worked really, really hard to elect them. So fingers crossed. If you are interested in running for office, you are running for office, you need help with fundraising, you need help with strategy, you need help with field, contact Olivia. She is the best. She really, really, really is terrific. So Olivia, thank you so much for coming on Samanthropolitics.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great night. Well, everyone, that is it for this night's episode of Samanthropolitics. I know this was a long one, so thank you so much for sticking with us. So much to cover with regard to the midterms. We got to hear from two separate candidates from two very purple states, Texas and Virginia, about why they're running for office, a school teacher and a nurse practitioner, Susanna Gibson and Gwenn Burud. And we got to hear from Olivia Logan of Logan Strategic Services. I probably messed that up. But Olivia Logan, who is a political strategist and consultant. So, November 8th is coming up. As people said, this is the last stretch. Donate, donate, donate. Volunteer. Go knock on doors. If you are a Democrat, go to democrats.org to sign up and to see volunteer opportunities. Knocking on doors really, really does work. And this last stretch really makes the last bit of difference. And go beyond those people that you see on MSNBC, on CNN, on Fox. Go to those local candidates. You could tell, hearing from Susanna, they really need our support, but they're often overshadowed by congressional races, which get more of the money and the glamour and the PR. But yet, as Olivia was saying, building that bench is so important because the state senators become the congresspersons, become the senators, become the vice presidential nominees. It really is a line. Even school level PTO is a breeding ground for future congresspersons, for future senators, for future attorneys generals of a state. So, really volunteer for those local candidates. If you're somebody that says, I don't do politics, well, I go to my friend Michael Sani, who runs something called Bite the Ballot in the UK. And he says, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. Politics is embedded in all of our lives. We cannot ignore it. It affects whether you get your bill paid for when you go to the hospital. It affects whether you have clean water or clean air. It affects your job opportunities. It affects your, being able to get an abortion. It affects your education. It affects sex education. I mean, there's so many things that politics does affect within your lives. And yet people seem to know more about fantasy football or, sports statistics than they do about their congressperson. So also get educated before you vote. Do your research, figure out what's going on, see if you can vote early. A lot of places now have voting early, so you can go in and vote early before the election. But do not miss these elections on November 8th. If you liked this episode, please share it with your social media on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I don't care. Whatever you're on, TikTok, please share this episode. We are also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, please subscribe to us and give us that 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple so that people can find us and are able to hear this content and coverage. There's a lot of right-wing YouTubers out there, especially women. That's part of why I started this show, because there were very few on the left that were covering politics that are women on YouTube. And I need your help to get these voices out there. I cannot do this alone. So I'm asking you to help me and to help these amazing women running for office. Lastly, you can really show your support by becoming a member on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Samanthropolitics, SAMANTHRO, and then the word politics, for as little as $3 a month to support our production costs, to support all of the time and research and energy that goes into producing this show. I also want to thank Zach at Stream Inspectors. Every time I say, hey, Zach, can you put up that slide? Zach has been doing this show with me for 2 years. Stream Inspectors are the leaders in live stream production. If you want a really cool show like this, look up Stream Inspectors. Maybe you can even get me to come host it for you. Depends on the topic, but we can work that out. But look up Stream Inspectors. I think that's it for tonight. I'm excited to see what happens on November 8th, and we'll see you on the next episode of Samanthropolitics. Thanks again for listening, and good night.